Cat's breaking my chops here. Anyway, finished what? Module 3, that's what we're up to, the security, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So, network security concepts. This is a lot of information. All right, gotcha. We finished 2, we're on 3. All right, I'm going to move this text box to the side. Usually I see it if it flashes. If I don't, just holler out. Unmute and holler out, okay? Network security concepts. This is a lot of information. We'll probably end up taking like a break in the morning, say 88 slides. Might be a break in the morning, lunch, and then finish it in the afternoon, okay? So we'll see how that goes. You should be able to explain how vulnerabilities, threats, and exploits can be mitigated to enhance network security. Understand always with network security, it's a layered endeavor. The only thing you can ever hope to do is buy time. You cannot keep a dedicated, experienced hacker out of your network. You just can't. Sooner or later, they'll get you, okay? Well, believe me, ask the Department of Defense, ask the government. They have all the money in the world and they still can't keep people out, and all the best security too. However, do note that when you do get in, the FBI usually does end up knocking on your door. Should be able to describe the current state of cybersecurity and vectors of data loss. That means how you lose data, you know, the threat actors, all that good stuff. Describe the tools used by threat actors to exploit networks. Describe malware types, common network attacks, how IP vulnerabilities are exploited by threat actors, how TCP and UDP vulnerabilities are exploited by threat actors. Also explain how IP services are exploited by threat actors. Describe best practices for protecting a network. Always a layered endeavor. You got to do it all. If you don't, you're going to get got. Describe common cryptographic processes used to protect data in transit. So, listen, just read this slide so I can take a hit or two off of my crack pipe here, my vaporizer. I really hate to say this because if you don't know this by now, wait for that knock by the FBI. We got 17 participants. Sounds like more than we have in class. Who we got? People I got to throw out. By the way, people, I'm going to have to put a password on this Zoom session. So in the future, you'll have to log in with the password. I'll give the password to you at the end of the day because administration is questioning why I'm not using a password. They're, worried about Zoom bombing and somebody getting in and, disrupting the class. But I'm like, yeah, because of Zoom bombing. We haven't been bombed. I told them I've had 0 problems. I found one person in that wasn't supposed to be in, and I removed them. It takes like 10 seconds, not even to remove them. Besides, anybody that Zoom bombs us, I expect you guys to eat them up alive and send them out crying. Okay? Period. I ain't worried about being Zoom bombed. I love to abuse people. You come up in here acting stupid. I got stupid for you. But they don't want us to engage with them. I consider it fun. I mean, hey, we're all freaking locked up in our houses. I think it's amusing. Give me somebody to abuse for a minute or two. And then I'll just block them and they can't get back in. But I'm going to have to set a password on this. So if you got a pen and paper, write it down. It is 202020. Okay? That's going to be the password the next time you log in. Now, when I edit this Zoom session tonight, when we're done, tomorrow you'll have to log in with that 202020. In addition to that, you'll probably receive an email because I modified the Zoom session. All right. So email will have a link and it should allow you to log right in. You may have to enter that password right there. Okay?
The email won't have the password, right?
What?
Will the email have the password?
Yes, I'll put it in the email, but it's right there on screen. Realistically, the link should be encoded with the password. So if you actually have the link, it should be encoded with it. And you should only have to click on the link. But if it prompts you for a password, it's 202020. And I put that in the chat so the Zoom bombers see it. Because I welcome a little bit of amusement once in a while. Anyway, so you guys read the screen, right? All right. So I'm obliged to say, we're going to talk about tools and techniques that you would use in a sandboxed, offline environment. All right. Not against actual live networks. Because look, in all honesty, hacking is illegal. All right. You get caught doing it depending on what you did, or not even what you did, but what somebody says you did. You can be prosecuted. So keep that in mind. All right. Moving right along, now that you've read that. Current state of cybersecurity. Cyber criminals now have the expertise and tools necessary to take down critical infrastructure and systems. Tools and techniques continue to evolve almost on a daily basis. Maintaining a secure network ensures the safety of network users and protects commercial interests. All users should be aware of security terms in the table. You have assets. An asset is anything of value to the organization. It includes the people, equipment, resources, and especially data. Vulnerability is a weakness in a system or its design that could be exploited by a threat. Trust me, there are people that do nothing but look for vulnerabilities in systems. You have the actual threat is a potential danger to a company's assets, data, or network functionality. Exploits are a mechanism that takes advantage of a vulnerability. Mitigation is the countermeasure that reduces the likelihood or severity of a potential threat or risk. Now, if you look at it, us being locked up in our houses like this, and trust me, my internal clock is totally screwed up. I don't know if I want to have a shot of Bacardi or a meatball or something. I can't tell what time of day it is anymore. And I sit right in front of a freaking window. This being locked down is like insane, but network security involves multiple mitigation techniques. The risk is the likelihood of a threat to exploit the vulnerability of an asset with the aim of negatively affecting the organization. Risk is measured using the probability of the occurrence of an event and its consequences. Now, remember, risk and negatively affecting an organization. Just hearing that, 1 million credit card numbers and social security numbers were stolen from Target, okay? That risk negatively affects Target. AT&T with their credit card, okay? They recently had a couple of million users' information stolen. Not recently, within a couple of years it's happened. That negatively affected them because understand, there is one thing that is worth way more than money to every vendor, and that's your information. Your information keeps you coming back because you're already using this system, keeps you coming back. It's easy. All right. So it's better than cash. With cash, you go into this store one day, you go into that store another day. Okay. Just because you didn't like the way the floor looked in the store or something. Who knows? Who cares? But see, online, we don't see that. We just see the reliability and the availability of a resource. So your data, your information is worth far more than cash money to vendors on the internet. Vectors of network attacks. An attack vector is a path by which a threat actor can gain access to a server, host, or network. Attack vectors originate from inside or outside the corporate network, as shown in the figure. Internal threats have the potential of causing greater damage than external threats because internal users have direct access to the building and its infrastructure devices. Now realize the external threats from the internet. The very second that you turn up a production interface on the internet, in other words, a public address, that interface is under attack 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It is constantly being polled, constantly being pinged, constantly being, or should I say, constantly, users in the infrastructure, the public infrastructure, are constantly trying to compromise that interface, get through it, get past it, get something on the inside, okay? That's the external threats, the internet. That is always there. It's ever present. Never let your guard down to the internet because you will get got in a heartbeat, all right? The internal threats, they're of a couple of different flavors, really. You have that disgruntled employee that got passed over for a position, all right? He's a threat. And that's an intentional threat when he tries to compromise hosts and the internal infrastructure. And then you have the unintended participant. This is somebody that takes their little USB stick home. The kiddies have been playing on the computer all day, downloading dumb games and all that kind of stuff. Games that are compromised, whatever they can get for free. And then you insert your USB stick after your kids were playing on your computer. Next thing you know, well, you wouldn't know, let's put it that way, your memory stick gets compromised, okay? A file you're working on that allows scripting gets compromised. You save your work, you go to work the next day, you insert your USB stick, you open up your document that was compromised or your USB stick that was compromised, and the attack begins. And you don't even know about it. You're an unwilling participant, all right? So there are willing participants, unwilling participants. You have to realize that. Of course, the willing participant is more of a threat than an unwilling participant, but don't discount the unwilling participant, all right? Because if the memory stick that they're using is compromised appropriately, there's nothing you or they can do to stop that. You now have to do your work on the network side to contain and resolve that threat, okay? Internal threats have the potential to cause greater damage than external threats because internal users have direct access to the building and its infrastructure devices. Remember how a firewall works. The internet is zero trust. The demilitarized zone, the DMZ, where you host servers, is 50% trust. The internal network is 100% trust, all right? So you have the most access to resources from the inside as opposed to the DMZ or outside. Data loss or data exfiltration, where you snatch data out when data is intentionally or unintentionally lost, stolen, or leaked to the outside world. Data loss can result in brand damage, loss of reputation, loss of competitive advantage, loss of customers, loss of revenue, litigation and legal action resulting in fines and civil penalties. I'm sure at some point you've heard the government going after companies because their security measures were so messed up that they lost like 8 million social security numbers. Significant loss, cost and effort to notify affected parties and recover from the breach. Remember, anytime you see that there's some major data loss, that major data loss probably happened 3 months ago. They don't immediately notify you. All right. So, like, look, if you have a Capital One card and their systems get compromised, do you think they immediately notify you? No, they don't. They're not required to really immediately notify you. They are required to immediately notify law enforcement, like the FBI, etc., so it can be investigated before the hackers know that the company knows they were hacked. So they don't immediately disclose that their information was compromised. That comes out 2, 3 months later after the FBI has had time to investigate the data loss. All right. But eventually they do have to notify you. And in some instances, most instances, they have to provide you free access to these credit score monitoring companies. So it's all a scam, I think. Personally, I think it's all a scam. Hate to say it, but I mean, this is the world we live. You all live in New York, right? So you understand what I'm saying. Company loses information. Some other company now reports, we'll contact them, this, that, the other thing. You don't find out about it for 2 or 3 months. Come on now, really? Anyway, network security professionals have to protect the organization's data. Various data loss prevention controls have to be implemented that combine strategic, operational, and tactical measures. The methods that this is done through. You have email and social networking. An intercepted email or instant messages could be captured and reveal confidential information. You should never put hey, I just put the 202020 in the chat. Do you really think I should have did that? Nah, I shouldn't have done that. But hey, what the hell? We haven't been whacked yet. I doubt we will. If we are, we'll deal with it. Personally, I hope you beat them up badly, verbally, But hey, whatever, as long as I don't get caught out there in it. Unencrypted devices. If the data is not stored using an encryption algorithm, then the thief can retrieve valuable confidential information. Now realize data should be encrypted at rest and in transit. At rest means when it's stored on a hard drive, etc., the information should be encrypted. Whenever possible, when it's in transit, it should also be encrypted. Cloud storage devices. You have sensitive data can be lost if access to the cloud is compromised due to weak security settings. Removable media. One risk, an employee could perform an unauthorized transfer of data to a USB drive. Another risk is that the USB drive containing valuable corporate data could be lost. Hard copy. Confidential data should be shredded when no longer required. Shred it or burn it, whichever way works better for you. In large organizations, companies, etc., you can call a company that, you put it into a trash bin that's locked. They roll it out to their truck. I'm sure you've seen them by 25 Broadway. They roll it out to a truck. The truck sucks in the bucket, empties the data, the hard copy, into a shredder, and they do mass shredding, okay? Improper access control, passwords or weak passwords that have been compromised can provide a threat actor with easy access to corporate data. Threat actors, you have white hat hackers, gray hat hackers, and black hat hackers, okay? White hat hackers. Okay, we got text. Let's see what that's about. Yeah, right? White hat hackers. These are ethical hackers who use their programming skills for good, ethical, and legal purposes. Security vulnerabilities are reported to developers for them to fix before the vulnerabilities can be exploited. That's what they do on their 9 to 5. Okay? After 5 o'clock, it's all straight up black hat. Gray hat hackers, individuals who commit crimes, do arguably unethical things, but not for personal gain or to cause damage. Gray hat hackers may disclose a vulnerability to the affected organization after having compromised their network. Then you have black hat hackers. These are unethical criminals who compromise computer and network security for personal gain or malicious reasons, such as attacking networks. Script kiddies. These are like teenagers, kids, unexperienced hackers running existing scripts, tools, and exploits to cause harm, but typically not for profit. They're doing it for the fun of it. Okay? Believe me, there's an awful lot of stuff on the internet that you can just download and use to, screw up networks. A lot of that stuff doesn't work that well, but then again, these younger people, they can root a phone before you can even say what. So think about it. They're not as dumb as they look. Vulnerability brokers. These are usually gray hat hackers who attempt to discover exploits and report them to vendors, sometimes for prizes and rewards. You have hacktivists. These are like, Julian Assange type people. Gray hat hackers who publicly protest organizations or governments by posting articles, videos, leaking sensitive information, and performing network attacks. So Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. Cyber criminals, black hat hackers, either self-employed or working for large cybercrime organizations, because they do exist, state-sponsored, either white hat or black hat hackers who steal government secrets. Now, I guess if you're stealing government secrets from a government you don't like, that would be a white hat hacker. Get it? There's really no such thing. A hacker is a hacker is a hacker is a hacker, period. It's just what you get paid to do with your skills. You have these skills. Do you think at 5 o'clock you turn these skills off? No, you don't. You go looking for other stuff to do. Targets are foreign governments, terrorist groups, corporations. Most companies around the world, countries in the world, participate in some degree with state-sponsored hacking. Look, Russia does it, China does it, America does it, everybody does it. North Korea does it all day long, every day, and twice on Sunday. Cyber criminals, it's estimated that cyber criminals steal billions of dollars from consumers and businesses. Cyber criminals operate in an underground economy where they buy, sell, and trade attack toolkits. Now, these are the real tools. These aren't the, easily downloadable stuff on the internet that script kiddies use. These are real tools, all right? Zero-day exploit code, botnet services, banking trojans, keyloggers, and anything you can think of that could compromise the system. They also buy and sell private information and intellectual property that they steal. Cyber criminals target small businesses and consumers, as well as large enterprises and entire industries. Two examples of hacktivist groups are Anonymous and the Syrian Electronic Army. Although most hacktivist groups are not well organized, they can cause significant problems for governments and businesses. Activists tend to rely on fairly basic, freely available tools. Think Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. And how did that work out for him? Not too well.
Julian who?
Julian Assange. You don't know the guy that started up WikiLeaks? The one that put out all that information on Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, everybody that was running in the last election. Look him up, Julian Assange. I think he's hiding somewhere. You got one government wants him for rape. The US government wants him for leaking state secrets. Another government wants him for what he knows. Last I heard, where is he? Jesus. It was someplace in Europe. And then you got the other guy, what's his name? The one that's in Russia right now and can't come back to the US. He used to work for the CIA. Edward Snowden, yeah, that's the one. Okay, so realize, I mean, hey, yep, that's him, Edward Snowden. But hey, look at it like this. The information they came out with made you say, those things that make you go, okay, that was one of them. And both of them did that. Snowden, we realized just how much the government is spying on us and why they need that 20-acre data center in Utah. And Julian Assange, all the other stupidity that came out in that last presidential election, and prior to that, other information that he dropped. Anyway, state-sponsored hackers create advanced customized attack code, often using previously undiscovered software vulnerabilities called zero-day vulnerabilities. An example of a state-sponsored attack was the Stuxnet malware, created to damage Iran's nuclear enrichment capabilities. They just spun the freaking centrifuges out of control. Threat actor tools to exploit a vulnerability. A threat actor has to have a technique or a tool. Over the years, attack tools have become more sophisticated, highly automated. New tools require less technical knowledge to implement. But now think about it. If you really have the technical knowledge, you can implement them far better. Table highlights categories of common penetration testing tools. Notice some tools being used by white hat and black hat. Keep in mind, the list is not exhaustive. New tools always being developed. So when you look at it, the testing tool, you have password crackers. Password cracking tools, often referred to as password recovery tools, can be used to crack or recover a password. Password crackers repeatedly make guesses in order to crack the password. Examples of them are John the Ripper, Off Crack, Loft Crack, THC Hydra, Rainbow Crack, and Medusa. You have wireless hacking tools used to intentionally hack into a wireless network to detect security vulnerabilities. Some examples are Aircrack NG, Kismet, Insider, Kismac, Firesheep, VI Stumbler. Network scanning and hacking tools used to probe network devices, servers, and hosts for open TCP and UDP ports. Examples of scanning tools are Nmap, Superscan, Angry IP Scanner, and NetScan tools. Packet crafting tools used to probe and test firewalls' robustness using specially crafted forged packets. The examples are HPing, Scapy, SOCAT, Yersinia, Netcat, NPing, and Nemesis. You have packet sniffers. All right, you're familiar with these. You should be. Wireshark. Used to capture and analyze packets within a traditional Ethernet LAN or wireless LAN. You have Wireshark, TCP dump, EtherCap, DSniff, EtherApe, Paros, Fiddler, Rat Proxy, and SSL Strip. And these lists go on and on and on, okay? You got rootkit detectors, directory and file integrity checker used by white hats to detect installed rootkits. Examples are AID, NetFilter, PF, OpenBSD packet filter. Fuzzers to search vulnerabilities. Fuzzers, tools used by threat actors to discover a computer's security vulnerabilities. Some examples are Skipfish, Wapiti, and W3AF. Forensic tools used by white hat hackers to sniff out any trace of evidence existing in a computer. Examples are SleuthKit, Helix, Multigo, and Encase. Debuggers used by black hat hackers to reverse engineer binary files when writing exploits. Also used by white hats when analyzing malware. Debugging tools are GDB, WinDBG, yeah, that's right, IDA Pro, and Immunity Debugger. I always get those two when you go back and forth between them. It's GDB, BGG, DGB, DBG, whatever. Hacking operating systems, specially designed operating systems preloaded with tools optimized for hacking. Examples of specially designed hacking operating systems are Kali Linux, Backbox Linux, not Black Box, Backbox Linux. Encryption tools use algorithm schemes to encode the data to prevent unauthorized access to the encrypted data. Examples are Veracrypt, CipherShed, OpenSSH, OpenSSL, Tor, OpenVPN, and Stunnel. Vulnerability exploit tools identify whether a remote host is vulnerable to a security attack. Examples of vulnerability exploitation tools include Metasploit, Core Impact, SQL Map, Social Engineer Toolkit, NetSparker. Vulnerability scanners scan a network or system to identify open ports. Can also be used to scan for known vulnerabilities and scan virtual machines, BYOD devices, bring your own device. Client databases, examples are Nipper, Core Impact, Nessus, Saint, and OpenVAS. Some of the attack types, you have an eavesdropping attack. This is when a threat actor captures or listens to network traffic. The attack is also referred to as sniffing or snooping. Data modification, threat actors have captured enterprise traffic, can alter the data in the packet without the knowledge of the sender or receiver. IP address spoofing attacks is where you construct an IP packet that appears to originate from a valid address inside the corporate intranet, even though you're not in there. Password-based attacks, threat actors discover a valid user account. Threat actors then have the same rights as the real user. They use the valid account to obtain a list of other users, network information, change server and network configs, modify, reroute, and possibly delete data. Denial of service attack, there are two types. You have denial of service and distributed denial of service. Denial of service is easy to overcome. Distributed denial of service is not easy to overcome. Denial of service attack prevents normal use of a computer or network by valid users. The denial of service attack can flood a computer or the entire network with traffic until a shutdown occurs because of the overload. A denial of service attack can also block traffic, which results in loss of access to network resources by authorized users. Man-in-the-middle attack occurs when threat actors have positioned themselves between a source and destination. They can now actively monitor, capture, and control the communication transparently. You have compromised key attacks. If the threat actor obtains a secret key, that key is referred to as a compromised key. Compromised key can be used to gain access to a secure communication without the sender or receiver being aware of the attack. Sniffer attacks. Sniffer is an application or device that can read, monitor, and capture network data exchanges and read network packets. If packets are not encrypted, a sniffer provides a full view of the data inside the packet. And you got malware. Now that you know about the tools that a hacker can use, this topic introduces you to different types of malware that hackers use to gain access to end devices. End devices are particularly prone to malware attacks. It's important to know about malware because threat actors rely on users. That means you install this software to help exploit the security gaps. First and most common type of computer malware is a virus. Viruses require human action to propagate and infect other computers. That's like you moving your memory stick from here to there to there to here. The virus hides by attaching itself to computer code, software, or documents on the computer. When opened, the virus executes and infects the computer. Viruses can alter, corrupt, delete files, or erase entire drives, cause computer booting issues, and corrupt applications. capture and send sensitive information to threat actors, access and use email accounts to spread themselves, and also lay dormant until summoned by the threat actor. Some of the modern viruses developed for specific intent. You have boot sector virus, attacks the boot sector, file partition table or file system, kills your drive, okay, kills your hard drive. Doesn't matter if it's an old Bernoulli drive or an SSD, kills the hard drive. Do note you can generally repartition, reformat, and reinstall whatever operating system you have. Firmware viruses virus attacks the device firmware. You have macro viruses. The virus uses the MS Office macro feature maliciously. Program viruses insert themselves into another executable program. Script viruses attacks the operating system interpreter that's used to execute scripts. Trojan horses. Threat actors can use Trojan horses to compromise hosts. Trojan horse is a program that looks useful, but also carries a malicious code. Trojan horses often provided with free online programs like computer games. Several types of Trojan horses described in the table. You have remote access, where it enables or unauthorized remote access. You have data sending, provides the threat actor with sensitive data such as passwords. Destructive, corrupts or deletes files. Proxy, uses the victim's computer as the source device to launch attacks and perform other illegal activities. FTP, enables unauthorized file transfer services on end devices. Security software disabler, stops antivirus programs or firewalls from functioning. You have denial of service, slows or halts network activity. Keyloggers, actively attempt to steal confidential information such as credit card numbers by recording keystrokes entered into a web form, as well as passwords and other things. You have adware, usually distributed by downloading online software. Adware can display unsolicited advertising using pop-up web browser windows, new toolbars, or unexpectedly redirect the web page to a different website. These things are done using all different types of techniques. We'll get into some of them. Pop-up windows may be difficult to control as the new windows pop up faster than users can close them. Everybody's gotten that kind of stuff once. We've all gotten hit with that, doing dumb stuff on the internet. And it's not even dumb stuff. You just visit the wrong site. Next thing you know, it's all over. Your computer's locked and you got to buy a $200 Walmart card. If you're smart, you just shut down the computer real quick without even pressing any keys, restart it into safe mode, and then you can recover from there. Ransomware typically denies a user access to their files by encrypting the files and displaying a message demanding ransom for the decryption key. I'm sure if you've been watching the news, you've seen that's happened to at least one state government and a couple of hospitals recently. All right, users without up-to-date backups have to pay the ransom to decrypt their files. Payment usually made using wire transfer for cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin. You have rootkits used by threat actors to gain administrator account level access to a system. Very difficult to detect because they can alter the firewall, antivirus protection, system files, even operating system commands to conceal their presence. Provide a backdoor to threat actors, giving them access to the PC, allowing them to upload files, install new software to be used in a distributed denial of service attack. Special rootkit removal tools have to be used to remove them. Or you can do a complete OS reinstall. Do note that overwriting your existing, like just installing on top of your existing operating system, may not do the job, okay? You may actually have to reformat the drive in order to reinstall an operating system and all of your applications. Keep that in mind, all right? Just reinstalling your operating system doesn't always work. You have spyware, which is like adware, but used to gather information about the user and sent to threat actors without the user's consent. Spyware can be a low threat, gathering browsing data, or it can be a high threat, capturing personal and financial info. Worms are self-replicating programs that propagate automatically without user action by exploiting vulnerabilities in legitimate software. Uses the network to search for other victims with the same vulnerability. The intent of a worm is usually to slow or disrupt network operations. Now remember, a lot of these are polymorphic. That means that once they execute their code and infect a system, when they propagate to the next system, they modify their code so that they're not the same exact attack as it was on the prior system, which typically makes it harder to catch up and contain and mitigate. Oh, look at that, break time. What is it, it's 10:29? You wanna take a couple of minutes break and then come back at this?
Yeah.
Okay, so take 15 minutes to 10:45 and we'll come back at this, all right? This is a long one. It's a lot of yapping on my end. So 15 minutes, 10:45, we're back. Okay? Everybody back? Everybody ready? We got 1, 2. Okay, I'll take that to mean other people are ready too. So moving right along, you have common network attacks. Let me move this text bar. Remember, if you got a question, text it. If I don't see it, just unmute and holler out, okay? When malware is delivered and installed, payload can be used to cause a variety of network-related attacks to mitigate the attacks. Useful to understand the types of attacks. By categorizing network attacks, it's possible to address types of attacks rather than the individual attack itself, okay? Because listen, when hackers are hacking networks, do you honestly think they only have one plan when they go into it? No, they have multiple plans and they typically run them back to back, okay? Networks are susceptible to the following types of attacks. Easily conducted is a reconnaissance attack. You can do all kinds of whois lookups and everything to find out address blocks for various corporate networks, etc. It's freely available on the internet, okay? You have access attacks, denial of service attacks, all of which, the reconnaissance attacks are when you go out and you learn as much as you can about the network. Then the access attack follows. And then typically denial of service or whatever, that's the leftover stuff. That's what you do just for the hell of it. Reconnaissance is information gathering. Threat actors use reconnaissance or recon attacks to do unauthorized discovery and mapping of systems, services, and vulnerabilities. Reconnaissance attacks precede access attacks or denial of service attacks. Now listen, this is where you go out and you find out what the corporate network's public address block is, right? Once you find the public address block, you hit it a couple of times, find whatever services you can. You try to get past that public interface to the private interface. Once you get to the private interfaces, you start looking for whatever services are available, open ports, etc. All open ports are a threat. Even used open ports you're using are a threat. And things have to be locked down accordingly. Reconnaissance attacks, some of the techniques used by threat actors to conduct reconnaissance attacks listed here. You have the technique. Perform an information query of a target. The threat actor is looking for initial information about the target. Various tools can be used. Google search, the organization's website, who is, much more. Just go to whois.org and you can find out a lot of stuff about different corporate networks. Initiate a ping sweep of the target network. Information query usually reveals the target network address. Threat actor can now initiate a ping sweep to determine which IP addresses are active. Now, think about this in the larger context. If you're going to attack a network, are you going to query inactive addresses? Because that would be an immediate tip to the fact that, this is an attack. But if you're only querying live addresses, get it? Addresses that are in use. Doesn't look so much like an attack if it's done in stealth mode. Stealth mode means that you randomize your attack. Instead of pinging, let's say 172.16.1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, you ping 172.16, 1.200. A couple of minutes later, not immediately, but a couple of minutes later, you ping 1.150, 1.10, 1.19. That looks less like an attack than pinging them sequentially to find out which hosts are actually alive. In other words, active on the network. Initiate a port scan of the active IP addresses. Now, after the ping sweep comes the port scan. All right. So once you know which nodes are actually on the network and responding, you can then port scan only those nodes. Port scans can also be done in stealth mode. That means that you scan this port on this device, that port on the other device, another port on a totally different device, and then you come back around, you circle around until you've hit all live IP addresses for all ports that can be compromised. Okay? Used to determine which ports or services are available. Examples of port scanners include Nmap, Superscan, Angry IP Scanner, NetScan tools. Run vulnerability scanners. This is to query identified ports to determine the type and version of the application and operating system running on the host. Examples of this are Nipper, Core Impact, Nessus, Saint, and OpenVAS. Then you run your exploit tool. Threat actor attempts to discover vulnerable services that can be exploited. Variety of vulnerability exploitation tools exist, including Metasploit, Core Impact, SQL Map, Social Engineer Toolkit, NetSparker. Realize these tools have predetermined code that is known to compromise various services. Access attacks exploit known vulnerabilities in authentication services, FTP services, web services. Purpose of these types of attacks is to gain entry into web accounts, confidential databases, and other sensitive information. Threat actors use access attacks on network devices and computers to retrieve data, gain access, escalate access privileges to administrative status. Password attacks. In a password attack, the threat actor attempts to discover critical system passwords using a whole host of methods. Okay? Password attacks, very common, can be launched using a variety of password cracking tools. Spoofing attacks. In a spoofing attack, the threat actor device attempts to pose as another device by falsifying data. Common spoofing attacks include IP spoofing, MAC spoofing, DHCP spoofing. Spoofing attacks are discussed later in more detail. Other access attacks are trust exploitations. Realize that in most corporate networks, you have three zones. You have the internal zone, the demilitarized zone, which is a 50-50 point between the internet and the internal network. And then you have the external zone, which is 0% trust, 50% trust on the DMZ, 100% trust by default. These values, you can tweak these, 100% trust on the inside network. okay? There is usually some measure of trust configuration between inside hosts and the DMZ. So if you can compromise a DMZ service, you have access typically to the inside hosts. You have port redirections. This way you send it to one port, but inside the packet, it's actually redirected to another port. You have man-in-the-middle attack. This is where you place yourself between two devices. Number of ways you can do this. And you capture all traffic leaving the network, capture all traffic coming back into the network. Buffer overflow attacks. Anytime you run any type of electronic device down on resources, okay? This means you suck up the CPU, you suck up the RAM, fill all the buffers. That in fact opens additional holes in the operating system of the device. Social engineering is an access attack that attempts to manipulate individuals into performing actions or divulging confidential information. Some social engineering techniques also performed in person, while others may use the telephone or internet. Social engineers often rely on people's willingness to be helpful. They also prey on people's weaknesses. To note that anytime you have a policy in place that requires paperwork to be filed before certain actions can take place, if you're like a supervisor or something, you need to ensure that you back your people. They must uphold the policy. There is no calling over the phone and saying, hey, I'm Joe Blow, the VP from this and that. You need to do this right now. No, there isn't. Did you file the paperwork? Now, of course, you can't be like, as blunt as that, but you need to ensure that they appropriately file the necessary paperwork so that the action they need can be taken. All right? Don't ever let anybody above you bully your people into doing something that you know wasn't supposed to be done. Because when push comes to shove, that doesn't come back to that employee directly. It comes back to you as the supervisor. So always back your people when they tell somebody no, because the necessary documentation is not in place. Got to remember that. That's a critical factor. Social engineering attacks, you got pretexting. Threat actor pretends to need personal or financial data to confirm the identity of the recipient. You got phishing. We've all been subject to phishing and spear phishing, spam. We've all been subject to that. Okay? Threat actor sends fraudulent email disguised as being from a legitimate trusted source to trick the recipient into installing malware on their device or to share personal or financial information. Spear phishing creates a targeted phishing attack tailored for a specific individual or organization. You have spam, also known as junk mail. Unsolicited email often contains harmful links, malware, or deceptive content. Something for something, called quid pro quo. When a threat actor requests personal information from a party in exchange for something such as a gift. Baiting leaves a malware-infected flash drive in a public location. Victim finds the drive, unsuspectingly inserts it into their laptop, unintentionally installing malware. Because do note that there are initialization processes for USB sticks, CDs, any type of removable media. The initialization may or may not run some batch file that calls a program into action. So keep that in mind. You find a memory stick, might not want to install that and plug that into your computer because it may actually be bait. Impersonation, type of attack where a threat actor pretends to be someone they're not to gain the trust of a victim. Tailgating is where a threat actor quickly follows an unauthorized person into a secure location to gain access to a secure area. What this means is that they walk right behind you as you're going in and say, hey, yeah, thanks. for holding the door, because what? We usually do hold the door for the person behind us, right? Okay. For a secure area, you're not supposed to do that. Each person should have to card themselves or ID themselves into the secure area. There is no two people walking through an open door at the same time. Shoulder surfing, where a threat actor inconspicuously looks over someone's shoulder to steal their passwords or other information. You have dumpster diving, where they rummage through your trash bin to discover confidential documents. Look, if you throw away your bank statement and you don't shred it or rip it up well, what do you think? Somebody's got your bank account information. Social engineering toolkit set, designed to help white hat hackers and other network security professionals create social engineering attacks and test their own networks. Enterprises have to educate users about the risks of social engineering, develop strategies to validate identities over the phone, email, or in person. Look, the most comprehensive method of validating somebody is some type of multi-factor authentication, okay? That can be done electronically. It can be done with other measures. You ever lose not forget your password, because we usually don't forget passwords, but all kinds of hiccups in systems. Sometimes you'll enter your password. You know it's the right password, but it doesn't work. Enter it again. And then by the third time, they're telling you, look, if you enter it wrong again, we're going to lock out your account. And then you have no choice but to reset your password. Okay? So there are a number of different ways that we can secure those features. This figure shows the recommended practices that should be followed by all users. First, never give your username, password credentials to anyone. Never leave your username, password credentials where they can be easily found. We used to do raids at BMCC of offices, okay? Administrative offices. We would look behind the monitor. We would look at all stickies on the monitor. We would flip the keyboard, flip the mouse pad, the little pad you use for your mouse, and look for stickies. Because people have a tendency to just like write passwords on stickies and then stick them to the computer somewhere or the desk. Okay? You'd be surprised how many times you find passwords and usernames like that. It's insane what people do. And I kind of understand it because, look, we all get tired of, hey, you can't use the last 6 passwords. It has to be this long. It has to have this type of character. That is a pain in the frickin' ass. Okay? But then again, you got these people that leave the same password on their account for years. And they have a sticky on their computer for it. That's insane. Never open emails from untrusted sources. Never release work-related information on social media sites. That's a quick death for you. All right? You'll be fired if that's ever found out. Never reuse work-related passwords. Always lock or sign out of your computer when unattended. Always report suspicious individuals lurking around. Always destroy confidential information according to organizational policy, which basically typically means shred it. All right? And that's how you protect against social engineering attacks. Denial of service attack comes in 2 flavors. Denial of service, you can stave off that attack yourself. However, a distributed denial of service, you now have to call your service provider to assist because you can't block the entire network. Kind of defeats the purpose of having a network. Denial of service attack creates some sort of interruption of network services to users, devices, or applications. 2 major types of denial of service attack. Overwhelming quantity of traffic. Threat actor sends an enormous quantity of data at a rate the network, host, or application can't handle. Causes transmission and response times to slow down. Can also crash a device or service. Maliciously formatted packets. Threat actor sends a maliciously formatted packet to a host or application. The receiver is unable to handle it because it's not in their correct data format for processing, causes the receiving device to run very slow or typically crash. Denial of service attacks are a major risk because they interrupt communication, cause significant loss of time and money. The attacks are relatively simple to conduct, even by an unskilled threat actor. Then you have the distributed denial of service attack, similar to a denial of service attack, but this attack originates from multiple coordinated sources that have already been compromised. IP vulnerabilities and threats. IP for IPv4 and IPv6 does not validate whether the source IP address contained in the packet actually came from that source. For this reason, threat actors can send packets using a spoofed source IP address, whether it's IPv4 or IPv6. Security analysts have to understand the different fields in both IPv4 and IPv6 headers. Some of the more common IP-related attacks are shown in the table. So there you have the attack techniques and the description of the attack. We'll go over them one by one. ICMP, I've probably already told you a couple of times that ICMP is not your friend. There are only like 3 different things in ICMP that we must run on networks. Everything else can be disabled with no effect. Okay? So keep in mind, ICMP, Internet Control Messaging Protocol, whether it's for IPv4 or IPv6,
Welcome to Pluralsight,
is not your friend. There are only a couple of things necessary for your network to operate correctly that use ICMP. Threat actors use Internet Control Messaging Protocol, echo packets, pings, to discover subnets and hosts on a protected network. They also use them to generate denial of service flood attacks and to alter host routing tables. Amplification and reflection attacks. Threat actors attempt to prevent legitimate users from accessing information or services using a denial of service and distributed denial of service attack. Now, what this is you have valid users on the network attempting to gain access to a allowed resource. But because the denial of service, more commonly distributed denial of service attack, is flooding that device, you can't gain access. You have address spoofing attacks. Threat actors spoof the source IP address in an IP packet to perform blind spoofing or a non-blind spoofing. This is where you change the address in a packet, okay, and you simply send it out. The source address is different, so you can continuously send out packets. Man-in-the-middle attack. Threat actors position themselves between a source and destination to transparently monitor, capture, and control the communication. They could eavesdrop by inspecting captured packets using like Wireshark or something, Ethereal, anything like that, or alter packets and forward them to their original destination. Session hijacking. Threat actors gain access to the physical network and then use a man-in-the-middle attack to hijack a given session. ICMP attacks. Threat actors use Internet Control Messaging Protocol for reconnaissance and scanning attacks. They can launch information gathering attacks to map out a network topology to discover which hosts are active, reachable, identify the host operating system, that's OS fingerprinting, determine the state of a firewall. Threat actors can also use ICMP for denial of service attacks. Note that in ICMP for v4, all right, ICMP v4 for IPv4 and ICMP v6 for IPv6, they are susceptible to similar types of attacks, all right? In ICMP v4, there are only like 3 things that you must have active for your network to function correctly. One of them is source quench. in ICMP v6, your NDP protocols must be allowed, as well as source quench and 2 others, for your network to operate correctly. Networks should have strict ICMP access control list filtering on network edges to avoid ICMP probing from the internet. In the case of a large network, security devices such as firewalls and intrusion detection systems detect such attacks and generate alerts to the security analysts. Now, when you get to IDS and IPS, intrusion detection, intrusion prevention. Intrusion detection cannot save you from an attack. It is a passive device. It only generates alerts when it sees a signature in data that appears to be an attack. IPS, intrusion prevention, on the other hand, can alert you and prevent an attack by resetting the connection. Okay, so keep that in mind. IDS can't save you, it can only tell you. IPS can tell you and save you. Both run on signatures. Firewalls, like the adaptive security appliance and the PICs, also run on signatures. Signatures allow the device to see attack patterns in really long strings of data. You have 2 types. You have atomic, which is that one packet that's an attack. And then you have these signatures that are a long, slow, drawn out pattern of attack over multiple packets, multiple megabytes of data. All right? Some of the attacks for ICMP, take a look at the table. You have ICMP echo request and echo reply used to perform host verification and denial of service attacks. ICMP unreachable used to perform network reconnaissance and scanning attacks. ICMP mask reply used to map an internal IP network. Let me ask you a question. If I say send to one of your router or switch interfaces an ICMP mask request, should your device reply to that? No. Because when it does, it tells me what the scope of your address range is. Now I can target my ping sweep so it doesn't set off senses. Okay? ICMP redirects used to lure a target host into sending all traffic through a compromised device and create a man-in-the-middle attack. You have ICMP router discovery. This is ICMP RDP is what it's really called, Router Discovery Protocol. But ICMP router discovery used to inject bogus route entries into the routing table of a target host. Amplification and reflection, look at the diagram and it plainly explains what it is, okay? So a threat actor uses multiple hosts to initiate a distributed denial of service attack against a victim station, all right? So the threat actor has rootkits installed in various hosts in the internet. He simply clicks a button, clicks OK, and causes all of those compromised hosts to immediately attack a specific device all at once. Since the attack itself is coming from multiple places on the internet, it really doesn't look like an attack initially until you're flooded and you can't respond to anything. Threat actors often use amplification and reflection techniques to create denial of service attacks. The example in the figure illustrates a Smurf attack used to overwhelm a target host. Newer forms of amplification and reflection attacks, such as DNS-based reflection and amplification attacks, and NTP, Network Time Protocol. Remember, that's UDP port 123. Amplification attacks are now being used. Threat actors also use resource exhaustion attacks to either crash a host or consume the resources on the network. Address spoofing attacks. IP address spoofing attacks occur when a threat actor creates packets with false source IP address information to either hide the identity of the sender or to pose as another legitimate user. Spoofing usually incorporated into another attack, such as a Smurf attack. Spoofing attacks can be non-blind or blind. Non-blind, the threat actor can actually see the traffic being sent between the host and target. Non-blind spoof determines the state of a firewall, and sequence number prediction can also hijack an authorized session. Blind spoofing, the threat actor can't see the traffic sent between the host and the target. Blind spoofing used in denial of service attacks. Why? Because I don't care. I'm just throwing as many packets at it as I can from different IP addresses. MAC address spoofing attacks happen at layer 2, used when threat actors have access to the internal network. The threat actor alters the MAC address of their host to match another known MAC address of a target host. No break. Sorry. We're gonna keep rolling, okay? I'll take that as an okay. Oh, there were 2 people that chatted up already. Okay. I see USB sticks on the floor by the courthouse. Yeah, those might actually be those vape pens, the Juuls. They kind of look like memory sticks, but you never know. Wait, what? Vape break? Look, it's 11:15. If you want another 15 minutes, we can do it, because this is all me talking today for the most part. So tell a brother what you want to do. If you want another 15 minutes, tell me, we can do it. Long as we get this presentation done before today, before the end of the day. Nah? Okay. So we'll keep rolling. You have TCP and UDP vulnerabilities. Do realize TCP and UDP are totally different. Okay? TCP is connection oriented, requires the 3-way handshake to establish initial sequence numbers for both ends of the communication session. UDP does not use sequence numbers. Those sessions are approximated. TCP segment information appears immediately after the IP header. Fields of the TCP segment and the flags for the control bits fields are displayed in the figure. Following are the 6 control bits of the TCP segment. You have the urgent pointer field, the acknowledgement field, the push function, the reset connection function, the SYN function, and the FIN function. We've already talked about the SYN, FIN, ACK, okay? The only 3 we haven't talked about previously is the urgent, push, reset. But those are the 6 bits. TCP provides the following basic services: reliable delivery, incorporates acknowledgements, forward reference acknowledgement to guarantee delivery if a timely acknowledgement is not received. The sender then retransmits the data. Requiring acknowledgements of received data can cause substantial delays. Examples of application layer protocols that make use of TCP reliability are HTTP, SSL, TLS, technically secure sockets layer, transport layer security. Those 2 terms are used interchangeably nowadays. I mean, we did have pure SSL, but that was later converted to TLS, transport layer security. So they're technically the same thing. Nowadays, primarily TLS. FTP, DNS zone transfers. Remember, zone transfers are server to server. Those have to be reliable. However, your host requesting DNS resolution, that's UDP, that's unreliable. As well as other protocols, SMTP, get it? Flow control. TCP implements flow control to address the issue. Rather than acknowledge one segment at a time, multiple segments can be acknowledged with a single acknowledgement segment. Now, that's your window size. Window size. If we agree on sending 3,000 bytes, that's our window size. So if our initial sequence number is 1,500 and we agree on 3,000 bytes, I send you 1,500 to 3,001. Then I send you 3,001 or 3,002 to 4,500. You acknowledge 4,501. That tells me that 3,000 bytes arrived intact, usable, and I can begin sending the next window. Stateful communication. TCP stateful communication between two parties occurs during the three-way handshake. This is where the numbers that the source wants to use and the numbers that the sender wants to use are coordinated via the ISN, initial sequence number. TCP connection is established in 3 steps. The initiating client requests a client-to-server communication session with the server. Okay? Now, do note, the sequence is 100. These initial sequence numbers are randomized. Okay? Why? Because it creates a more reliable session. If you have multiple sessions using the same sequence numbers, that's a little problematic. So this ensures a more reliable session when the sequence number, the ISN, initial sequence number, is randomized. So the host on the left sends a sequence number, ISN, of 100. The control bit is set to a SYN, synchronization value. The SYN is received. The receiving host on the right sends back its own SYN. So the host on the left chose 100. The host on the right chose 300. The host on the right, the receiver, acknowledges 101, indicating that 100 was received intact and usable. The host on the left acknowledges 301 to the host on the right, the receiver, indicating that 300 was received and usable. Okay? Now, when they begin to transmit data, the host on the left starts at 101. If the window size is 10, he sends 101 through 111. Then the host on the right acknowledges 112 to indicate 101 through 111 was valid. You get the general idea, right? Server acknowledges the client-to-server communication session and requests a server-to-client communication session. The initiating client acknowledges the server-to-client communication session. We now have our 2 sets of numbers at each end of the communication session to track what was sent, what was received, so we can control that communication session. TCP SYN flood attack. The threat actor sends multiple SYN requests to a web server. Web server replies with syntax for each SYN request and waits to complete the 3-way handshake. But the threat actor doesn't respond to the syntax. That is a half-open session, is what that's called. A valid user can't access the web server because the web server has too many half-open TCP connections. Remember, when you open a connection, that is one less resource the server has to use to attend to new connections. All right? So the connection itself has to be fully established in order to allow the device to process more. When you open too many sessions and do not complete that session, 3-way handshake, the server runs out of resources to process new session requests. Terminating a TCP session uses the following 4-way exchange process. When the client has no more data to send in the stream, it sends a segment with the fin flag set. In other words, I'm finished. The server sends an acknowledgement to acknowledge receipt of the fin to terminate the session from client to server. The server then sends a fin to terminate the server to client session. Client responds with an ACK to acknowledge the FIN from the server. That allows both devices to restore all their values, all of the memory buffers, everything used for that session to the free pool so they can be reused. A threat actor could do a TCP reset attack and send a spoof packet containing a TCP reset to one or both endpoints. And then they never actually finished the session. TCP session hijacking, another TCP vulnerability. Although difficult to conduct, threat actor takes over an already authenticated host as it communicates with the target. The threat actor has to spoof the IP address of one of the hosts, predict the next sequence number, send an ACK to the other host. If successful, the threat actor could then send but not receive data from the target device. UDP segment header in operation. Remember, UDP does not use sequence numbers. Connectionless, commonly used by DNS, TFTP, network file services, and simple network management protocol. Also used with real-time applications such as media streaming or VoIP, voice over internet protocol. UDP is a connectionless transport layer protocol, has much lower overhead than TCP because it's not connection oriented, doesn't offer sophisticated retransmission, sequencing, flow control that provide reliability. Reliability functions are not provided by the transport layer protocol and have to be implemented elsewhere if required. Low overhead of UDP makes it very desirable for protocols that make simple request-to-reply transactions. You see the difference in this header, this UDP header in the diagram. Very simple. That's a TCP header, complex. UDP, not protected by any encryption. You can add encryption to UDP, but it's not available by default. Lack of encryption means anyone can see the traffic, change it, send it on to the destination. UDP flood attacks. The threat actor uses a tool like UDP Unicorn or low orbit ion cannon. Tools send a flood of UDP packets, often from a spoofed host address, to a server on the subnet. Program will sweep through all the known ports trying to find closed ports. This will cause the server to reply with an ICMP port unreachable message. Because there are many closed ports on the server, creates a lot of traffic on the segment, uses up most of the bandwidth, results similar to a denial of service attack. IP services, ARP vulnerabilities, address resolution protocol. Has a couple of vulnerabilities to it. Hosts broadcast an ARP request to other hosts on the segment to determine the MAC address of a host with a particular IP address. The host with the matching IP address in the ARP request sends an ARP reply. Every other host discards that ARP request. Any client can send an unsolicited ARP reply, also called a gratuitous ARP. When a host sends a gratuitous ARP, other hosts on the subnet store the MAC address and IP address contained in the gratuitous ARP in their ARP table. This feature of ARP also means that any host can claim to be the owner of any IP or MAC. A threat actor can poison the ARP cache of devices on the local network, creating a man-in-the-middle attack to redirect traffic. Let's say you want to send stuff to the gateway, and you think my MAC address is the gateway. Ta-da! I'm now in the middle of everything you send out. That means when you open up your bank account, I'm watching. You get the general idea. ARP cache poisoning can be used to launch various man-in-the-middle attacks. PCA, let's say, requires the MAC address of its default gateway, R1. Therefore, it sends an ARP request for the MAC address of 192.168.10.1. R1 updates its ARP cache with the IP and MAC address of PCA. R1 sends an ARP reply to PCA, which then updates its ARP cache with the IP and MAC address of R1. The threat actor then sends two spoofed gratuitous ARP replies using its own MAC address for the indicated destination IP addresses. PCA then updates its ARP cache with its default gateway, which is now pointing to the threat actor's host MAC address. Remember, when you're routing off the LAN segment, you send it to your gateway's MAC address, not its IP address. The destination IP is the target host on the other side of the router. All right, so now if you receive a gratuitous ARP that causes you to change your ARP cache and specify that 192.168.10.1 is actually the MAC address of the threat actor's host, well, you're going to send everything to that threat actor. He's going to send it to the legitimate gateway. When it comes back, since you would have saw off the source of the packet, the gateway is going to send it back to the threat actor. The threat actor then sends it back to the actual host. So you can now capture data on its way out and capture data on its way back in. ARP poisoning attack can be passive or active. Passive ARP poisoning is where threat actors steal confidential information. Active ARP poisoning is when threat actors modify data in transit or inject malicious data. DNS attacks come in a number of different ways. Domain name service protocol defines an automated service that matches resource names like Cisco.com with the required numeric network IP address, such as the IPv4 or IPv6 address. Includes the format for queries, responses, data, and uses resource records to identify the type of DNS response. Securing DNS is often overlooked on the network. Technically, it's not your job. That's the sysadmin's job, not the network admin. Unless you're managing the DNS server, it's usually not your problem. However, it's crucial to the operation of a network and should be secured accordingly. DNS attacks include DNS open resolver attacks, DNS stealth attacks, domain shadowing attacks, and tunneling attacks. The open resolver attack. DNS open resolver answers queries from clients outside of its administrative domain. The open resolvers are vulnerable to multiple malicious activities described in the table. You have DNS cache poisoning attacks. Threat actors send spoofed, falsified resource record information to a DNS resolver to redirect users from legitimate sites to malicious sites. DNS cache poisoning attacks can all be used to inform DNS resolver to use a malicious name server, providing resource record information for malicious activities. DNS amplification and reflection attacks. The threat actors use denial of service or distributed denial of service attacks on open resolvers to increase the volume of attacks and hide the true source of an attack. Threat actors send DNS messages to the open resolvers using the IP address of the target host. The attacks are possible because the open resolver responds to queries from anybody asking for resolution. DNS resource utilization attacks. Wow, we got questions? Oh, we got a question. Where is it? Obviously, you've been playing. DNS, better make sure the FBI don't knock on your door. DNS resource utilization attacks. Denial of service attack that consumes the resources of open resolvers. The attack consumes all the available resources to negatively affect operations of the open resolver. The impact of the attack may require the DNS open resolver to be rebooted or services to be stopped and restarted to close all connections. Stealth attacks used to hide their identity. The threat actor also uses the DNS stealth techniques described in the table to carry out attacks. You have fast flux. Threat actors use this technique to hide their phishing and malware delivery sites behind a quickly changing network of compromised DNS hosts. The DNS IP addresses are continuously changed within minutes. Botnets often employ fast flux techniques to effectively hide malicious servers from being detected. Double IP flux. Threat actors use the technique to rapidly change the host name to IP address mappings and also change the authoritative name server. This increases the difficulty of identifying the source of the attack. You have domain generation algorithms. Threat actors use this technique in malware to randomly generate domain names that can be used as rendezvous points to their command and control servers. These are the devices creating the attack. DNS domain shadowing involves threat actor gathering domain account credentials in order to silently create multiple subdomains to be used during the attacks. Subdomains typically point to malicious servers without alerting the actual owner of the parent domain. This is like, you can have www.cisco.com, ftp.cisco.com, kissmybutt.cisco.com, all pointed to different servers. Tunneling. Actors who use tunneling place non-DNS traffic inside of the DNS traffic. This method often circumvents security solutions when a threat actor wishes to communicate with bots inside a protected network or to exfiltrate data from the organization. This is how DNS tunneling works for CNC commands sent to a botnet. Command and control commands, okay? The command data is split into multiple encoded chunks. Each chunk placed into a lower level domain name label of a DNS query. Because there's no response from the local or network DNS for the query, the request is sent to the ISP's recursive DNS servers. The recursive DNS service will forward the query to the threat actor's authoritative name server. Process is repeated until all the queries containing all of the chunks are sent. When the threat actor's authoritative name server receives DNS queries from the infected devices, it sends responses for each DNS query that contain the encapsulated encoded CNC commands, command and control. That launches the attack. The malware on the compromised host recombines the chunks, executes the commands hidden within the DNS record. To stop DNS tunneling, the network administrator has to use a filter that actually inspects DNS traffic. Pay close attention to DNS queries that are longer than average or those that have a suspicious domain name. The HCP servers, it's a four-step process. The host boots, sends out a DHCP discover broadcast looking for a DHCP server. The DHCP server responds with a DHCP offer that contains the information the host needs. The DHCP host then sends a DHCP request back to the server to lock in the information. The DHCP server then responds with either a DHCP ACK acknowledgement, you're good to go, use it. NAC, negative acknowledgement, no good, you took too long, start with a new DHCP discover, okay? So DHCP servers dynamically provide IP configuration information to clients. In the figure, client broadcasts a DHCP discover message. The DHCP responds with a unicast offer to the MAC address of the host that includes addressing information the client can use. Client broadcasts a DHCP request to tell the server, client accepts the offer. Server responds with a unicast back to the MAC acknowledgement, accepting the request. A spoofing attack occurs when a rogue DHCP server is connected to the network and provides false IP config parameters to legitimate clients. A rogue server can provide a variety of misleading information. Wrong default gateway. Threat actor provides an invalid gateway or IP address of its host to create a man-in-the-middle attack. This can go entirely undetected as the intruder intercepts the data flow through the network. Wrong DNS server. The threat actor provides an incorrect DNS server address pointing to the user to a malicious website. Wrong IP address. The threat actor provides an invalid IP address, invalid default gateway address, or both. Threat actor then creates a denial of service attack on the DHCP client. Look, if you're on a network and you have the wrong address and gateway, then you can't go anywhere. You can't even talk to other hosts on the local segment, all right? If you have the wrong DNS server, every time you type anything in, it can go to a DNS server that points you to porn.com. You get the idea, right? Then you have the wrong default gateway. If I provide you the wrong default gateway on a subnet, you think I'm the gateway. You send everything to me that needs to go to another network. I process it out. I process it back in and copy all the data as it goes. Assume a threat actor has successfully connected a rogue DHCP server to a switch port on the same subnet as the target clients. Remember, most DHCP servers are not on the same LAN segment. All right, now what that means is it takes longer for the actual DHCP server to respond than the one on the local segment with the host. Okay? Client broadcasts DHCP discover request looking for a response from a DHCP server. Both servers receive the message. The legitimate rogue DHCP server, the legitimate and rogue DHCP servers, both respond with valid IP config parameters. The client will always send its DHCP request to the first offer received. Now, like I said, if the rogue server is on the same segment, the rogue server's packets are going to get to you first before the legitimate server that's on another segment. Now, given that inside a host, there's no method to determine rogue servers or anything, and the host really has no method to say, hey, I like this offer better than that offer. It will simply accept and apply the first response it receives. Okay? Client received the rogue offer first, broadcasts the DHCP request, accepting parameters from the rogue server. Legitimate and rogue server each receive. Hold it. Bingo. The legitimate and rogue servers each receive the request, but only the rogue server unicasts a reply to the client to acknowledge its request. Legitimate server stops communicating with the client because the request has already been acknowledged. Network security best practices. You have confidentiality, availability, and integrity, all right? Now look, CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, all right? That is actually the way it's said. Network security consists of protecting information and information systems from unauthorized access, use, disclosure, disruption, modification, or destruction. Most organizations follow the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. It's actually authentication, information security triad. Confidentiality, only authorized individuals, entities, or processes can access sensitive information. May require using cryptographic encryption algorithms, such as AES, to encrypt and decrypt data. Integrity refers to protecting the data from unauthorized alteration. Requires the use of cryptographic hashing algorithms such as MD5 or SHA. Availability, authorized users must have uninterrupted access to important resources and data. Requires implementing redundant services, gateways, and links. Networks should follow a defense in-depth approach. To ensure communications across both public and private networks, you have to secure devices, including routers, switches, servers, and hosts. Most organizations employ a defense in-depth approach to security, requires a combination of networking devices and services working together. several security devices and services can be implemented. You have VPNs, an adaptive security appliance firewall, intrusion prevention systems, email security appliance, web security appliance, AAA servers, authentication, authorization, and accounting servers. All network devices, including routers and switches, are hardened. You also have to secure data as it travels across various links, hopefully through encryption, although that's not feasible for everything. A firewall is a system or group of systems that enforces an access control policy between networks. An example, you can allow traffic from any external address to the web server, allow traffic to the FTP server, allow traffic to SMTP, email, allow traffic to the IMAP server, email again, SMTP to send, IMAP to retrieve. Conversely, you can deny all inbound traffic with network addresses matching your internal registered IP addresses, because you should never see your own addresses coming at your public interface unless they've been translated or they're inside of a tunnel. Deny all inbound traffic to the server from external addresses. Deny all inbound ICMP echo request traffic. Deny all inbound Microsoft Active Directory inquiries. Deny all inbound traffic to an MS SQL server. Deny all Microsoft domain local broadcasts. So that's an example of what a firewall does. Intrusion prevention system. To defend against fast-moving and evolving network attacks, you may need cost-effective detection and prevention systems integrated into the entry and exit points of the network. Intrusion detection and intrusion prevention technologies share several characteristics. Technologies are both deployed as sensors. An IDS or IPS sensor can be in the form of several different devices. A router configured with iOS IPS software, a device specifically designed to provide dedicated IDS or IPS services, in other words, an appliance, a network module installed in an adaptive security appliance, switch or router. IDS and IPS technologies detect patterns in traffic, network traffic using signatures. It's a set of rules used to detect malicious activity. IDS and IPS technologies can detect atomic signature patterns. These are single packet attacks or composite signature patterns, multi-packet attacks that take place over megabytes of information transfer. When you look at the IPS in the diagram there, it sits between your devices, your inside network, and your external network. All right, so threat actor sends a packet destined for a target laptop. The IPS intercepts the traffic, evaluates it against known threats and the configured policies. The IPS then determines it is in fact an attack, sends a log message to the management console, drops the packet, resets the connection. Content security devices like the Cisco email security appliance, special device designed to monitor simple mail transfer protocol. ESA, constantly updated using real-time feeds from the Cisco Talus. Threat intelligence data is pulled by Cisco ESA every 3 to 5 minutes. Cisco Web Security Appliance, WSA, mitigation technology for web-based threats. The WSA combines advanced malware protection, application visibility and control, acceptable use policy controls, as well as reporting. The WSA provides complete control over how users access the internet. WSA can perform blacklisting of URLs, URL filtering in conjunction with a third-party vendor like WebSense, malware scanning, URL categorization, web application filtering, and encryption and decryption of web traffic. Cryptography, securing communications. Organizations have to provide support to secure the data as it travels across links. Do realize in an organization, you're responsible for encrypting data at rest. Also, that means data stored on storage media must be encrypted. And then when it's decrypted for use and transfer, it should be encrypted while in transmission. Okay? May include internal traffic, but even more important to protect data that travels outside the organization. Look, anytime your data is about to be transmitted over wires through equipment that you do not own, it must be encrypted, really. Corporate data has to be encrypted. These are the 4 elements of secure communication. You have data integrity, guarantees the message was not altered. Integrity is ensured by implementing either MD5, which uses 128-bit key, or SHA, secure hash algorithm, that uses 160-bit, 384, up and up and up, all kinds of different algorithms for SHA. The longer the key, remember, the longer the key, the more computationally secure. The longer the key, the more computationally resource intensive also. Origin authentication guarantees the message is not a forgery, does not, and actually does come from whom it states. Many modern networks ensure authentication with 2 protocols, such as HMAC, hash message authentication code. Data confidentiality guarantees that only authorized users can read the message. Data confidentiality is implemented using symmetric and asymmetric encryption algorithms. You have data non-repudiation, guarantees the sender cannot repudiate or refute the validity of a message they themselves sent. Non-repudiation relies on the fact that only the sender has the unique characteristics or signature for how that message is treated. Cryptography can be used almost anywhere that there's data communication. In fact, the trend is toward all communication being encrypted. Data integrity, hash functions, used to ensure the integrity of a message. They guarantee the message data has not changed accidentally or intentionally. In the figure down below, the sender is sending a $100 money transfer to Alex. The sender wants to ensure the message is not altered on its way to the receiver. The sending device inputs the message into a hashing algorithm, computes its fixed length hash of the value you see there. The hash is attached to the message and sent to the receiver. Both the message and the hash are in plain text. The receiving device removes the hash from the message and then inputs the message into the same hashing algorithm. If the calculated hash is equal to the hash that was attached to the message has not been altered during transit. If the hashes are not equal, the integrity of the message can no longer be trusted. So there you see your starting hash, pay to Alex 100, and the end hash is very different. And the message was changed. Pay Jeremy 1,000. You get the idea there. 3 well-known hash functions. You have MD5 has 128-bit digest. MD5 is a one-way function, produces 128-bit hashed message. MD5 is legacy. Should only be used when there are no other alternatives available. You should use SHA-2 instead. SHA-1, similar to MD5, creates a 160-bit hashed message, slightly slower than MD5. SHA-1 has known flaws, also considered a legacy algorithm. You should use SHA-2 when possible. SHA-2 includes SHA-224, 256, 384, 512. Okay, so you can use 224-bit, 256-bit, 512-bit. All right, so 256, 384, SHA-512, next generation algorithms should always be used whenever possible. The longer the key, the more computationally secure. The longer the key, the more computationally resource intensive also. While hashing can be used to detect accidental changes, It can't be used to guard against deliberate changes. That means anyone can compute a hash for any data if they have the correct hash function. Therefore, hashing is vulnerable to man-in-the-middle attacks, does not provide security to the transmitted data. Origin authentication. To add authentication to integrity assurance, use a keyed hash message authentication code. An HMAC is calculated using cryptographic algorithm that combines a cryptographic hash function with a secret key. Only parties who have access to that secret key can compute the digest of an HMAC function. This defeats man-in-the-middle attacks and provides authentication of data origin. Two classes of encryption used to provide data confidentiality. The two classes differ simply in how they use the keys. Symmetric, same key at both ends. Asymmetric, one key used to encrypt, another key used to decrypt. Symmetric encryption algorithms such as DES, data encryption standard, that weaves a 56-bit key through the data. Triple DES, which weaves a 56-bit key through the data 3 times. And AES, advanced encryption standard. AES is the flavor of the day. Gotta tell you, DES, triple DES. Look, DES not considered secure. Triple DES, okay, if you can't get AES. All right? These are based on the premise that each communicating party knows the PSK, pre-shared key. Data confidentiality can also be ensured using asymmetric algorithms, including RSA, Revis, Shamir, Alderman, the guys that wrote the protocol, and the public key infrastructure, PKI. When you look down at the bottom, symmetrical encryption, same key to encrypt and decrypt. Key lengths are short, 40 to 256 bits, faster than asymmetric encryption, commonly used for encrypting bulk data, such as VPN traffic, whereas asymmetric encryption uses a different key to encrypt than the key to decrypt. Key lengths are long, 512 to 4096 bits, computationally tasking, therefore slower than symmetric encryption, commonly used for quick data transaction, like HTTPS when accessing your bank data. Remember, symmetric, bulk data, big stuff, gigabytes, megabytes. Asymmetric, small stuff, transactional. Symmetric encryption algorithms use the same pre-shared key, also called a secret key, to encrypt and decrypt data. Pre-shared key known by the sender and receiver before any encrypted communication can take place. Symmetric encryption algorithms commonly used with VPN traffic because they use less CPU resources than asymmetric encryption algorithms. When using symmetric encryption algorithms, the longer the key, the longer it takes for someone to discover the key. To ensure the encryption is safe, use a minimum key length of 128 bits. Some of your symmetric encryption stuff, you got DES, data encryption algorithm, triple DES, advanced encryption standard, SEAL, which is software optimized encryption algorithm, and the RC series, which are Rivist ciphers. DES, legacy symmetric encryption algorithm, can be used to stream cipher mode, usually operates in block mode by encrypting data in 64-bit block sizes. Stream cipher encrypts 1 byte or 1 bit at a time. Triple DES, newer version of DES, but repeats the DES algorithm process 3 times over. Considered very trustworthy when implemented using very short key lifetimes. AES, advanced encryption standard. Secure, more efficient algorithm than triple DES, popular and recommended symmetric encryption algorithm, offers 9 combinations of key and block length using a variable key length of 128, 192, or 256 to encrypt data blocks that are 128, 192, or 256 bits long. SEAL, software optimized encryption algorithm, faster alternative, symmetric encryption algorithm to DES and triple DES, as well as AES, uses 160-bit encryption key, has a lower impact on the CPU compared to other software-based algorithms. RC series, Rivish ciphers, algorithm was developed by Ron Rivest. Several variations been developed, but RC4 most prevalent in use. RC4, stream cipher, used to secure web traffic in SSL and TLS. Remember, SSL, TLS, SSL is what it was, TLS is what it is. Asymmetric encryption. We're coming up on lunchtime. What do you guys want to do? How many slides do we have left? Let's take a peek. We're at 78 of 89. You want to roll all the way through it? Tell a brother.
Dead silence.
Dead silence. What do you want? You want lunch? You're
Lunch.
hungry? You're hungry? Oh my God. Let me find where we were. There we go. Oh, no, we were right here. All right, so I'll call lunch since you guys are chicken and nobody says anything. Oh, wait a minute, we got chat. Let's see what the chat people are saying. Hold on, I gotta find that screen.
Yes, man, you do. You have to pull the video out of HTML. Usually you have to use a plugin to get that done.
All right, so that's where we are. Let me see what the chat's going on. Hungry.
Hold on, wait, are you asking me if I need the tool or you have the
lunch.
tool?
Yeah, keep going. All right, so lunchtime. Okay, so 1:10. All right, and then we'll pick up where we left off. All right, lunchtime. See you at 1:10. We'll finish this last 10 slides or so and move on from there. I do know that the next presentation has lots of labs.